At 9 years old, Napoleon Bonaparte arrived at a French military school unable to speak French. The year was 1779. Corsica had belonged to France for barely a decade, conquered, annexed, absorbed. To the boys at Brienne, this scrawny kid with the unpronounceable name wasn't a future emperor. He was a peasant, a foreigner, a target. They mocked his accent. They mocked his poverty. They mocked the way he pronounced his own name, Napoleon, instead of the proper French. They called him the Corsican, and they did not mean it as a compliment. What happened next would reshape the entire continent. But first, Napoleon had to survive 5 years of systematic humiliation and decide what to do with it. The Royal Military School at Brienne-le-Château was built to train aristocrats' sons for command. The students came from old French families with estates, titles, and money. Napoleon had none of these. His uniform was second-hand, visibly worn. His French came out garbled with Corsican rhythms, rolled consonants, misplaced emphases, a cadence that marked him as foreign with every sentence. The other cadets heard it immediately, and they never let him forget it. They excluded him from games. They imitated his voice behind his back and to his face. One classmate later recalled that Napoleon chose to be alone because he could not afford to be social. The small economies of school life, sharing food, buying favors, joining outings, required money he didn't have. His father, Carlo, had secured him a scholarship through minor Corsican nobility, but Carlo died when Napoleon was 15. He left behind debts, a widow with 8 children, and a failed mulberry farm that had consumed what little capital the family possessed. There would be no rescue, no inheritance, no family name that opened doors. So Napoleon disappeared into the library. And something began to change. While other boys played, Napoleon read. Plutarch's Lives of Great Men, Alexander, Caesar, the commanders who bent history to their will. He read Livy's accounts of Hannibal crossing the Alps. He read Rousseau, Voltaire, the military treatises of the age. He didn't just read, he took notes. He argued with the authors in the margins. He cross-referenced campaigns, memorized terrain, studied the mathematics of artillery trajectories. His instructors noticed something unusual. The awkward Corsican with the bad accent had a mind that moved faster than theirs. He could hold 30 or 40 logarithms in his head simultaneously. Geography, ballistics, tactical geometry. He absorbed them like water into dry sand. Years later, his staff would describe his mind as a chest of drawers. He could open one compartment, dictate a letter about regulations for a girls' school, close it completely, open another, plan the destruction of an enemy army, close it, sleep for 10 minutes, then return to exactly where he left off, mid-sentence, with perfect recall. That system wasn't natural. It was built in a cold dormitory by a boy no one wanted to eat dinner with. Napoleon completed the 2-year program in a single year. He was commissioned as an artillery officer at 16 years old, one of the youngest in French military history, and the only Corsican. The accent remained. The poverty remained. But now there was something else. A machine for converting humiliation into preparation. For 7 years after graduation, Napoleon was just another junior officer with strange vowels and too many opinions. He took unauthorized leaves to deal with family crises in Corsica. He scraped by on lieutenant's pay. He watched less talented men with better connections get promoted over him. Then came Toulon, September 1793. The French Revolution had devoured its own leaders, and was beginning to devour itself. The British Royal Navy had seized the port city of Toulon in southern France, and the revolutionary government was desperate to take it back. Desperate enough to listen to anyone with a plan. Napoleon was 24. He wasn't supposed to be in command of anything. But the artillery commander took a wound, and someone remembered the intense young Corsican who wouldn't stop talking about cannon placements and angles of fire. They gave him the guns. What Napoleon saw at Toulon, the senior commanders had missed completely. He identified a single position, Fort Leguillette, that dominated the entire harbor. Take that fort, and British ships would be exposed to artillery fire. They'd have no choice but to withdraw. Ignore it, and the siege could drag on for years. His commanders dismissed him. He was too young, too foreign, too arrogant. Who was this Corsican to lecture French generals? Napoleon positioned his batteries anyway. He placed himself at the most dangerous point of the assault and took a British bayonet through the thigh for it. When the final attack came, it followed his plan exactly. Toulon fell in December. The British evacuated. The Republic had its port back. And the strange lieutenant with the Corsican accent was suddenly a brigadier general. He was 24 years old. The outsider had proven something that couldn't be argued with. That library at Brienne, the one Napoleon disappeared into while the other boys played their games, wasn't just an escape. It was a reconstruction. He took what they said about him and buried it under layers of study, of preparation, of relentless internal rehearsal. By the time he reached Toulon, the voice in his head wasn't theirs anymore. It was his own. That same practice, replacing the noise with something deliberate, exists in smaller form today. If you want a structured way to build it, there's an app called Affirmations, link in the description. Now watch what happens when the outsider starts winning. Napoleon conquered Italy in a campaign that stunned Europe. He conquered Egypt and brought back the Rosetta Stone. He overthrew the revolutionary government in a coup and crowned himself Emperor of the French. And he still couldn't pronounce French properly. Witnesses at his coronation in Notre Dame Cathedral noted the accent. Diplomats at his imperial court noticed it. His enemies used it relentlessly in propaganda. Caricatures of the Corsican ogre with broken speech and barbaric appetites. Napoleon knew exactly how he sounded. He hired speech tutors. He practiced in private. The accent softened over the years, but it never fully disappeared. Every time he opened his mouth, some trace of the outsider remained. What did disappear was any pretense that he belonged to the old aristocratic order. He promoted marshals who had started as common sergeants. He gave battlefield commands to men who couldn't read. He judged by results, not bloodlines, because bloodlines had never done anything for him. The outsider didn't want to join the aristocracy. He wanted to replace it entirely. There is a price to being forged in isolation. Napoleon trusted almost no one completely. Not his ministers, whom he kept deliberately competitive and suspicious of each other. Not his subordinates, for whom he dictated tens of thousands of letters personally, because delegation felt like losing control. His own brothers disappointed him. He made them kings, and they governed like fools. His wife, Josephine, the one person he may have truly loved, could not give him an heir. So he divorced her and married a Habsburg princess he barely knew. When the end finally came, when all of Europe combined to drag him down, he faced it largely alone. Exiled to a volcanic rock in the South Atlantic, he spent his final years dictating his memoirs, still arguing with history, still explaining himself to an audience that would never answer back. The boy they laughed at became the man who terrified a continent. he redrew the map of Europe. He wrote legal codes still used today. The accent never left. Neither did the chip on his shoulder.